Hi, this is Jack Wilcox making a video for thepokerband.com. Today I'm going to be reviewing a session that I just played about an hour ago at 10 cent 25 cent Rush Poker. I thought that playing Rush might be interesting. If you've never seen it played before, this is a chance to see what happens. Basically, you join a lobby and they randomise the tables that you're sat at, so that you are just sat with a bunch of random people. You don't get to choose your table. If as soon as you fold, you get instantly moved to a new table with all the other players who've instantly folded on their other tables, and so it's just a continuous stream of hands. You don't have to wait for the action to finish. If you click fold, you just get instantly put on a new table. As for the playing style, it's generally a bit tighter than normal, obviously, because if you fold, you get instantly put at a new table when you've instantly got a new hand in front of you. So there's a bit less incentive to play marginal hands if you're fish, because you can just press fold and get a new hand straight away. We get into the action. As you can see on table 1, I've made a little bit of money. I basically played one hand before the footage started. This player limped in middle position, and I raised from the big blind with 5-6 suited. I think a lot of people would just check and see a flop, because they figure if they raise, he's likely to call, and they've only got 6 high. Whilst this is true, a lot of the times this player is going to be a weaker player who's going to limp call with quite a wide range. He's going to be limp calling with things like ace-3 offsuit and pocket 4s and king 10 offsuit and just random stuff like that. And basically, unpaired hole cards only make a pair 1/3 of the time on the flop. So 2/3 of the time he's going to limp and miss the flop, and he's obviously going to fold to a c-bet most of the time when he misses, especially as he, like I said, if you fold, you get instantly put on a new table. So he doesn't, if he's just a random fish, which he seems to be by limping in middle position, he doesn't need to chase gut shots to the river, trying to gamble, because he can just fold and get instantly put on a new table. So I find that a lot of people are playing filter fold, which creates good spots to try and steal by raising, and if you get called, then you just c-bet the flop and take it down. Here we actually flop a monster, and I bet, and he calls. We turn the straight. I bet big. I think that a really big turn bet is kind of mandatory, because a lot of his hands, a lot of his range improves with the 8 turn. 7-8 is obviously made 2 pair. If he's got a hand like pocket 9s, pocket 10s, pocket 5s, pocket 6s, they've now got a gut shot to go with their pair. So if he thinks I'm bluffing, he's obviously not going to fold, and even if he doesn't think I'm bluffing, he figures that he's got a lot of outs, maybe some implied odds. Also, if he limped in with a hand like ace-9 of diamonds, he's now got a gut shot to go with his flush draw, so he's not going to fold. Basically, this is just a good turn. I could have even gone a bit big. I could have literally just bet pot on the turn, I think. And yeah, actually looking back, I should have probably bet $4.75 or maybe even $5, just because I think that isn't going to fold. He calls, and then the river comes, and it's quite interesting. As you can see, he's just got over pot size bet left on the river. If he's got a 7, he's obviously not going to fold if I put him all in. If he's got a jack, he might decide that I've got enough missed draws in my range that he's not going to fold. Obviously, it's not shown in the replayer, but in real time, basically, snap called the flop and turn, which made me think that when the river comes a blank, if he's got a draw, he's going to fold for however much I bet, and if he's got a jack, he's not going to fold, whether I put him all in or whether I bet like $6. So I might as well try and get the most value that I can. I could have checked with the intention of check raising the river, but I think that I don't think he was going to bluff all of his draws when the board pairs, just because a lot of people tend to not give much credit when the board pairs. So you might think that he'll get called down kind of light. Also, if he has the ace high flush draw that missed, he might figure that he's got a bit of showdown value, that he's, he can check and beat my hands like king queen, etc. So there's not that many hands that get to the river without a pair, so I don't think he's necessarily going to be bluffing all that much when I check. Also, if he's got a hand like jack 10 and he decides to check it back, then that's a disaster. So I just go for the value town and try and get him to call his whole stack off, but he ends up folding. So you're not that interested in a hand, but I just wanted to show you it because you might have wondered how I got this $31. A couple of things that I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be mostly opening to 4x from under the gun, middle position and the calf, and the reason for that is that I think one, I don't think that the tables are going to be that aggressive with free betting, so I don't expect to get free bet very much. I expect to get cold called a lot more than free bet, and obviously when I've got the initiative and particularly when I've got a good hand, I obviously want to get the most money in the pot as possible. So if they're going to be cold calling a lot, then I should be making raise bigger. I also think that a lot of people don't adjust properly to different opening sizes. Like if I open to 4x, they're going to call with the same range that they'd call when I open to 3x, which is obviously wrong because I think hands like pocket threes, like say I open queens here, if I open to 75 cents, I think pocket threes can be a call if he's on the button, but if I open to $1, I don't think he should be calling with hand like pocket threes, just because he's not getting as good a price on my stack. If I open to 75 and there's $25 behind, he's got like 35 to 1 on a call, like assuming that he can stack me when he hits. Whereas when I open to $1, he's only got 25 to 1 on a call, which obviously if he's stacking me a lot is still going to show a profit, but you know, most of the time that you flop a set with pocket threes, it's going to be on a board like, you know, 7-5-3, and if I've got a hand like ace king or ace queen, I'm not going to really put much money in. So set mine and pre-flop. You want to make sure that you're getting a really decent price on their stack in order to call, unless my range is like super narrow. So I open to $1. I would have opened this 4-6 offsuit if it had folded to me, but when a cutoff opens, I don't know anything about him, so I'm not going to free bet. You can see that I've marked some players with yellow. Basically, before I started the session, I went down the lobby and I basically in the lobby it shows the player name and it shows how many tables they're on. And if you double click on the bit where the number of tables is shown, then you can get it so that all the people that are playing 4 tables, which is the maximum of rush that you're allowed to play, are shown at the top. Anyway, so basically I went through them and gave them all a yellow note, because what that does is tells me that they're a reg. Very, very rarely do you see a fish 4 table in rush, because it does get quite intense. So pretty much all the people 4 tabling and even 3 tabling are going to be regulars. And since the player pool is so huge at NL25, I'm never really going to get a good sample of. I'm never really going to get a good sample to determine people's VPIP and pre-flop raise. So if I can instantly label someone as a reg, then it helps me to adjust to them better than I would otherwise. With pocket queens here on table 2, I get free bet by the button. Now it's quite a long time since I've played NL25, and honestly, I'm not sure whether this guy would be free betting pocket jacks and pocket tens to stack off them. I think a lot of the times he's going to be just flat in those kind of hands, because you know he doesn't want to get a stack in versus an unknown. So when he free bets, I think his range is like really polarized between queens, kings, aces, and ace king, and then you know stuff like 5-6 suited, 7-8 suited. So it kind of makes no sense for me to 4-bet pocket queens, because I'm either going to get it in crushed or he's going to fold. So I decided to call, and my plan is to basically see what happens. I don't think that he's going to start, you know, going crazy on flops when I check call. So my plan is going to be to like check call most flops and then check fold a lot of turns, just because I think people see bet all the time but then give up at small stakes. So flop comes king jack 9. I've got obviously my pair plus a gut shot, and so I decided to call. I check the turn and he's going to fire out a bet. On table 1, obviously this guy limps in the cutoff. He's probably going to be a weak player. I decided to ISO raise with king jack offsuit from the small blind. I think that should be pretty obvious why. I'm going to have a pre-flop equity edge versus his range for limp calling from the cutoff. when I hit, there's going to be a lot of value from worse kings and worse jacks. When we both miss, I'm going to be able to fire a c-bet and take it down a lot, and if called, I'm usually going to have 6 outs to make an overpair to the board. On table 2, this 8 helps my range quite a lot. I don't think he should expect me to check fold this turn very often, so I don't think he's going to bluff it. Also, if he was free betting light with like a little suit connector, you know, he could have made 2 pair with 8-9 or, you know, Jack 8, Jack 9. But yeah, basically I don't expect him to expect me to fold this turn very often, so therefore I'm going to exploit him by folding. On table 1, this is, if I was in position and this guy checked me, I'd check this back, because I don't think there's a ton of value, and getting raised does kind of suck when you've got the king jack here, because obviously when he's raising, like, he could be bluffing, but if he raised and you get it in, you're going to get it in pretty bad against his range. So yeah, so also because I don't think there's a ton of value in a c-bet on this board, but being out of position on a drawy flop, there's not really much I can do. I don't really like check calling because I have absolutely no clue about what he's betting with, so I just decide to fire. If he calls, it's not the end of the world. You know, he can call with worse hands for sure. He thinks of it and makes a little min raise, which I haven't played against many players like this. I have absolutely no clue what it means, but I'm never folding with the pods that he's given me. Turn is at 8, so if he was to bet this turn when I check, I actually think his range would be pretty polarised between draws and a 9. I wouldn't really, if he min raised the flop with like ace queen, I'd expect him to just check back now on the turn. Even if he had a hand like 10 jack, I'd still expect him to check back this turn. With position, you know, he can see a safe river before deciding whether to value bet. So yeah, when if he was to bet this turn, I think he'd be pretty polarised, and I'd be calling again. He does actually bet super small, so I mean I can't fold just because I could have the best hand, and if I don't have the best hand, I have a lot of outs anyway. On table 2, I would raise pre-flop, flop come ace 9 6 two-tone. He had $4 stack. I could have fired a big c-bet. You know, like the pot would have been $2. I could have fired like 175 or something. You know, because of drawy board and stuff. But basically, I bet half pot on the flop with the aim of just roping him in with small bets, because I can get him all in on the river easily enough, whether I bet half pot or full pot on the flop here. So I just decide to half pot, and he leads the turn. I make a small raise trying to keep him in. He calls, and then he's going to shove this river. On the river, obviously I river the straight, but I don't think there's a ton of value in leading. If he was bluffing with like a flush draw, he's probably going to bluff the river if I check. He ends up showing 8-2, which is kind of weird. I'm not sure what he was trying to achieve by raising the flop or by betting the turn. Ace 6 I open from the small blind here against what is probably going to turn out to be a fishier player. He's not playing with a full stack. He's not on 4 tables because I don't have him marked, so he's not a short stacker. So he's probably just going to be some random. Also, in late position, I'm going to be stealing a ton just because people are going to have their quick fold button on so that they can get dealt on any table. A lot of people play really straightforward in rush and don't really mess about too much. Here I'm just making a note on this guy who limp called with 8-2 in the cutoff. It's pretty unlikely that I'm going to get a lot of hands on him, so the hands that I do play, I need to know exactly what he's doing so that I can make better assumptions in the future. Here I open pocket jacks blind v blind, obviously pretty standard. If this guy free bet, he's a 4 table in reg. If he'd free bet, I would expect myself to be able to 4 bet and get this in quite profitably. Blind v blind, obviously he knows I'm going to be opening a wide range, so he's going to be free betting a decent amount, so therefore I should be 4 bet bluffing a bit, just because he's going to be free betting light so much. And if I'm 4 bet bluffing a bit, I need to have hands like pocket jacks in my range so that I can stack off. Otherwise I'd be 4-betting and folding to a shove too often. Flop comes king, queen, 10. I don't see any value in betting this flop, so my plan is to check call, and I don't expect to get barreled off my hand on blank turns, so I'd just check fold. Like if the turn was a 2 of spades and he bet again, I'd just fold. I'd also be check calling the flop here with some stuff like ace queen, king 9, king 8, you know, that sort of range, because with those hands it sucks to get raised, and there's not a ton of value in betting, and there's also a lot of value in letting him bluff when checked to. As it is, he checks back. 5 of spades I considered leading because I didn't think he'd check back a king, and I thought he'd call a turn bet with stuff like a 10, but I thought it was a bit thin because he can also, you know, he can check back weak kings for sure, and he can definitely check back a queen. Rivers, obviously there's no value in betting, so I just check it down, and I end up winning. Open 8-7 suited under the gun. I'm just going to note that he didn't stab on the flop when I checked to him, which makes him a bit of a worse candidate to check to try and induce bluffs from in future, because obviously, you know, even though he had 6 high, he still checked it back. Yeah, I open 8-7 suited under the gun, which is pretty standard, I think. 8-7 suited is going to flop a ton of like overcards with flush draws, or it's going to flop a ton of straight draws. It's just going to flop a lot. It's going to flop some equity a lot of the time, and you can fire multiple barrels, and because of the equity you have when called with like a flush draw, it doesn't matter if he doesn't fold that much. Here I isolate a limper with 4-2 suited. Again, it's going to flop a lot of draws if I get called. Also, the boards that he misses is just going to check fold on, because people were playing kind of straightforward in rush. As it is, I get cold called by the big blind. Don't know anything about him, but I expect the average person's range to include some stuff like ace 10, king queen, pocket 8s, pocket 6s. So on this board, I don't expect to get called by a worse hand very often at all. I don't expect him to like check call the flop with king queen, even though it might be a good play versus a lot of people who c-bet too much. And at the same time, I don't expect him to fold a hand like pocket 8s, or, you know, obviously never folding a jack. But the problem with this hand is that if I check it back and he leads into me on the turn, I can't really call a bet, because I'm going to have bottom pair, no draw. So basically the only way for me to really win the pot is to bet the flop, and it's going to be a plus EV c-bet for sure, just because he's going to fold so often. But yeah, basically, if I had a bit of a better hand, like if I had 7-8, I could check back the flop and call a turn lead. But with 4-2, I just don't have any potential to improve, and even making him fold out hands like king queen and ace 10 that have got, you know, 25 to 28% equity versus me, that's not a terrible achievement, you know, just taking the pot down now. I open ace 8 offsuit in the cut-off on table 1. Basically, I'm going to be stealing a ton from cut-off and the button. In fact, I'm probably going to be opening 100% on the button, just because I expect people to fold way too much, especially if they're regulars and playing like a free bet or fold game. They're going to be folding just so often. As it is, I'll get check raised on the jack 7-2 rainbow. I have a 2 which reduces combos of pocket 2s, so he's not really repping a ton when he check raises, but I still don't feel comfortable about calling down an unknown with bottom pair there. Here I isolate a limper again. Flop comes pretty terrible, and if he checked, I would have just checked this back, because there's just so many hands that can call or check jam on me. Obviously when he shoves, I can't call. I would probably call if I had ace high with a heart in my... If I had like ace jack with the ace of hearts, I'd call that shove from him. Opening ace queen in the small blind, obviously I get jammed on by the big blind, if I remember correctly, and I've obviously got an easy call, but I happen to run into aces. With king queen here, with king 10 offsuit, sorry, It's obviously a standard open from the calf. I have, two high cards that can make, decent pairs when called. As it is, I think people will just fold so often that I show a profit anyway. But when called, I'm going to be able to take it down with a C bet, or I'm going to be able to flop top pair and get a bit of value. I C bet the flop. I'm going to two barrel this turn. I don't think it's too thin, although he's going to have king queen and king jack in his range. He's going to have a lot of draws as well. He's going to have a lot of mid pairs. This is a spot where I'm going to be two barreling this board quite a lot, because I'd expect him to raise his sets on the flop. It's impossible pretty much for him to have like a super strong hand, except for pocket threes, pocket sixes. The next strongest hand is really going to be like king queen, which is top pair, but it's not a monster. So anyway, this is a pretty standard two barrel. There's a lot of value from his hands. Like, I expect him to call again with like 6-7 pocket eights. If he's got 9x of spades, he's going to call again as well. Sometimes I owe myself when he has king jack and king queen, but you can't really just think about specific hands in their range. You have to think about their range as a whole. River comes the offsuit 3. There's not much. Well, there's like no value in betting. I don't think he calls a third time with a hand like pocket eights. I was undecided whether I was going to check fold or check call. Obviously, when I check to him, I expect him to value bet king jack and king queen, so check calling I'd kind of owe myself. But he can also bluff if he double floated with a flush draw, or if he called twice with 4-5. He can try and bluff the river, and I have a decent bluff catcher. So if he'd bet, depending on his size and his timing, I would have considered calling. As it was, he checks, and when he checks, I knew I'm good, because I wouldn't expect him to check a better hand ever. Open A7 suited on the button. I opened to 4x. I'm not sure if I like that. My logic at the time was that I felt, from my limited experience at 10 to 25%, people would call too much as opposed to free bet. So therefore, I want to make my pre-flop raises bigger so that they call more and put more money in the pot, only to fold the flop. But on the button, I think I want to make my steals a bit smaller, just to give myself a better price on the pre-flop bluff. Open queen 9 suited under the gun. I think most people would fold, but in these games that are playing really fit or fold, people just aren't free betting much. And if I'm not getting free bet, then I might as well open as many hands as I can, because I'm always going to have equity when called, and if both of us miss, then the one with the initiative is usually going to win the pot with a C bet. So opening a lot of hands is definitely going to show a lot of profit at 10 cent, 25% in my opinion. Fold to me, open king 9 offsuit in the small blind. If this guy turns out to be a regular, I might fold king 9 offsuit, because I'd expect to get played back at quite a lot, and it's not a hand that flops particularly well. It's pretty much impossible for you to flop a flush draw. Flopping a straight draw is quite difficult as well. And yeah, if he turns out to be aggressive regular, I'd probably be folding this. But versus unknown, I'm just going to open, see what happens. Flop comes ace 10 9, and much like the same logic as pocket jacks on the king queen 10 board, there's not really much value in c betting. He can call with a worse 9 obviously, but there's just tons of ace x and 10x, and it doesn't make much sense to c bet here. So I check. When I check, I expect him to put me on a hand like pocket fours and just bet with all his air, so I can comfortably check call, and then see what happens on later streets. I don't expect to get multi-barreled particularly when I check call. So my plan would have, I would have probably been check folding this turn had he bet, but obviously he checks back, so my plan is just to check it down and hope to be good at showdown. He shows 8-9, which I don't really understand why he bets the flop when checked to. Seems to be a sort of syndrome of small stake players, is that they just bet when checked to because the pre-flop raises showed weakness, which is all well and good. But if I'm checking on this board with a hand like pocket fours, obviously I'm folding to his bet, but pocket fours only got 2 outs anyway versus 9, so he doesn't really need to bet to protect. if I'm also checking, say I was checking a hand like ace 5 suited, which I would do pretty much always, you know, to induce bluffs, and because there's not a huge ton of value in betting the weak aces. Anyway, so if I've got a hand like that, you know, ace 5, I'm never going to fold, and he's just owned himself. So he's either putting himself in a spot where he gets called by a better hand that has him crushed, or he folds out a hand that he crushes anyway. You know, it's not like I'm going to check the flop with a hand like king queen, because, you know, I just c-bet that and hope to make him fold hands that were currently ahead of me, like pocket sevens, and stuff like that. So he hasn't really got a bet to protect. He should just be checking back. And yeah, this is interesting to note, because it makes me think that he's not a very good player. Here on table 1, I open the button and I'll get 3-bet really small. I was considering calling this 3-bet, not really to set mine, just to play, just to plan on calling a continuation bet on non-ace and king high flops, because obviously combinatorically he's going to have a lot more ace king, ace queen than he is going to have, you know, pocket jacks, pocket queens, just because there's way more ways you can be dealt ace queen offsuit than you can be dealt pocket jacks, right? So his range is going to be quite high card heavy, but the problem is that I know literally nothing about him. You know, he might be the sort of player there that only 3-bets aces and kings, in which case I'm doing pretty badly. 8-9 suited, again, that's going to be an open for me from any position at 6 max table. I really like the suited connectors. A lot of times I'd rather open, you know, 5-6 suited under the gun than ace-10 offsuit. And the reason for that is if the flop comes ace high, I'm generally not going to get played back at, so it doesn't really matter too much what I have on the ace high boards. You know, I'd rather be kind of polarised on the ace high boards between total air that I can comfortably fold to a raise, and, you know, the ace king, ace queen, which I can comfortably call a raise. The hands like ace 10 and ace 9 and stuff like that, they're quite tough to play when you start getting played back out on an ace high board. And obviously if they have air and fold, it doesn't matter what you have anyway. So yeah, that's, you know, also with a hand like 5-6 suited, if you raise that under the gun, the boards that hit you are going to be the boards that people don't expect you to hit. So the boards like 6-5-2, where you flop top 2, you know, people are going to put you on a lot of the high card hands like ace king and ace queen, and you're likely to get played back at. So it's important to be able to hit those low boards. It's a flop on table 2 where I could consider leading, just because 2 people have limped in, so it's hard for them to have a very strong hand. But the problem is that combinatorically wise, there's a lot of ways that he can have, you know, like ace 3 offsuit and stuff that are just obviously never going to fold. So I think leading the ace king queen is kind of bad against 2 players, just because there's so many ways that one of them could have an ace or a king. It's a shame there hasn't been too much action yet. Obviously, like I said, the game seemed to be playing really straightforwardly. People aren't really messing around too much. They're playing super fit or fold, which definitely, if you can play it without getting bored, it's a really easy style of play to exploit, because, you know, you just c-bet once and they either fold their air or call, and then when you get called, you know, they've got something, so you can just give up. Open 10-9 suited and get called by under the gun +1. If he's a regular, then he's going to have a lot of middling pocket pairs in his range. He's going to have some hands like ace queen, ace jack, king queen. Obviously I'm ahead of his range on the flop, so I'm going to fire out a continuation bet. I can definitely get value from, you know, hands like pocket sevens, pockets 5s, you know, they're not going to fold to 1 bet. He can also float this flop with ace queen, ace jack, which I think would probably be a decent play. The reason why it would be a good play for him to float the hands like ace queen, ace jack is if the turn comes a Broadway card. So if the turn comes like an ace, for example, if I've got a hand like king queen, I'm just going to keep firing, trying to represent the ace, because a lot of the times, you know, his range is going to be middling pairs, which obviously don't like the ace. So it's good. It's a good card for me to two barrel. So therefore, if he can call the flop with those hands like ace queen and ace jack, then when the turn comes to ace or the queen, and I fire a second barrel trying to represent it, you know, he's actually got the hand that I'm trying to represent. So he makes a lot of money from catching bluffs when he hits. So I get called and the turn is a 5, giving me a flush draw. It improves a little bit of his range if he called the flop with 7-8 or pocket 5s or 6-5, then he's now got, you know, a decent hand. But all his hands like pocket 7s and pocket 8s and 9-8 and 6-7 have just picked up additional outs if they're beat. So it's a turn card that I expect to get called on quite a bit. It does suck if he raises, and if he raised quite big, I would have to fold, which is kind of annoying because obviously I've got top pair and flush draw. As it was, he folded really quickly, which makes me think that he was floating the flop with a hand, you know, like ace queen or ace jack. And it's quite interesting to note that he didn't make a play on that turn card, which is quite a good turn card to make a play on, because if he raises really small, like, it puts me in a pretty crappy spot with a lot of my range, because I'm going to be two barreling all my overpairs on that turn. And if I've got a hand like pocket 10s and I'll get raised on the turn there, I mean, I'm not exactly ecstatic about stacking off, because really, what's the worst hand I can expect to see? You know, so it would have been a good play for him to make a small raise on that flop. On table 1, small blind opens into me. I've got 7-8 suited, so I call. I'm going to be calling with a really wide range when the small blind opens and I'm big blind. The reason being that if he opens to 75, it's 50 cents more for me into a pot of $1, so I'm getting 2 to 1 on a pre-flop call, which means that I don't have to win the pot very often post-flop in order to show a profit. Also, I'm going to be in position for the entire hand in a spot where he's probably trying to steal my blind with quite a wide range. So most of the time he's going to, you know, open like, say, ace 6 offsuit, and the flop's going to come, you know, flop's going to come, say, king 10-9, and he's going to fire out a c-bet, and I can either bluff raise or I can float, and he's going to have to check fold the turn. This board here, ace-6-2 rainbow, is quite a good board to float on, and the reason is that once you call, people put you on a hand like, you know, a weak ace, and they don't usually try to bluff you off it. Also, obviously, because he's going to be stealing with quite a wide range from the small blind, he's not likely to have hit this board very often at all. You know, most of the time he's just going to have king 10 or queen jack, something like that. The thing that made me fold in this spot was that he bet $1.25 into the pot of like 140. I feel that when he bets this big, he's going to have a value hand more often than a bluff. The reason being that I've either hit this board with like a pair of aces, or I've got total air in the form of something like 7-8 suited. So if he's bluffing, there's not really. If he's bluffing, I'm going to fold the same amount of times for a $1 bet as I am for a $1.25 bet. So if he's bluffing, it makes a lot more sense to bet a little bit smaller. And when he bets this size, I feel that he's going to have a value hand a lot, and he's just open either ace, and he can make the pot bigger. So I decided to fold. If he bet $1, I probably would have called with my backdoor straight draw and backdoor flush draw, purely because I think that he's going to check fold the turn a lot. And if he has got a real hand, then I can pick up quite a lot of outs on quite a few turn cards. I'll be opening this ace-4 suited if it's folded to me. If this player had opened, I wouldn't have 3-bet light, because he's got a bit of a short stack, so he's probably going to be a weaker player, since all the regulars would have auto reload on. And if he's going to be a weaker player, he's probably going to be calling 3-bets a lot. And obviously that's not really what I want when I've got a hand like ace-4 suited. I want him to be folding. Ace-9 offsuit, again, that's just going to be too loose to open from middle position, even though people aren't really playing back at me. When I do get called, they're usually going to have quite a lot of hands that dominate the ace-9 offsuit there. So, like I said, it's a spot where I'd rather open, you know, 8-9 suited than ace-9 offsuit, purely because you're not dominated as much. The boards you hit are the boards you get played back on, and when the flop comes ace high, people are just going to fold to your c-bet anyway because they put a lot of aces in your range. On the table on the left, small blind raises I call with king 5 offsuit. Again, I'm getting a good price. King high actually rates to be either ahead or very close to ahead of a lot of people's small blind opening ranges. This is a flop that I would have called again on, just because I'm probably got the best hand quite a lot of the time. But when he basically bets full pot, same as on the ace 7-2 board a minute ago, he doesn't need to bet this big if he's bluffing, because my range for calling the c-bet isn't going to change that much whether he bets $1 or whether he bets $1.60. So if he's bluffing, he doesn't need to bet this big. Also, to get this bet size in, he has to type it manually into the box, and obviously if he's typing bets in manually, he's obviously thinking about his bet sizing, and I feel that if he's thinking about his bet sizing, then he's probably got a decent hand, because if he was bluffing, he'd just click like pot and bet that, or click pot and slide down a couple of things and bet that. So yeah, I think that he's got a value hand here a lot more than air. On table 2, small blind min raised, and I called flop jack 3-5 rainbow. He checks to me. I don't really see any value in betting. I don't think he's going to check call with a worse hand, and to be honest, I don't think he's going to fold any better hands. If he's got a hand like ace 10, I think he's just going to check call on his board because he doesn't want to fold or whatever. And then he checks the turn, and I check back as well because again, don't see him folding anything that beats me. River comes a 7, putting a 4 straight on board. He checks to me a third time, and now I really don't think that if he's got a hand like ace 10, he's going to call. Even if he's got a hand like ace 3 or ace 5, I don't think he's going to call now on the river, just because there's a lot of hands. I can be value betting quite well here because he's shown so much weakness. I know his range is pretty weak, so I can be value betting like any 7, a strong 5 probably, and there's also quite a few 6s in my range, like 6-5, pocket 6s, ace 6, but mainly he's just not going to have anything, so I fold out quite a lot of hands with that river bet. I would have opened a 3-2 offsuit if it folded me on the button. I'm going to be, until I find someone who is like a maniac free better, I'm just going to be opening pretty much every button, since a lot of people will have the quick fold on, and so they'll just because if you quick fold out of turn, then you get instantly put on a new table. So if they've got a crap hand in the blinds, they're not going to wait for me to open before folding. They're just going to fold automatically. So I find that you definitely don't get played back at as much as you might in a normal game. Here I get free bet with I've got king high on the button. If we go back to that quickly, we're a bit deeper than normal. It would actually be a really cool time for me to put in a 4-bet bluff here. If he's the sort of regular who's going to be free betting, quite a polarized range, it's a good spot to put in a 4-bet bluff because I have a blocker to the king, which reduces the amount of pocket kings and ace king combos he can have. And because we're a bit deeper, he has to be kind of worried that this pot's going to get big quite quickly if I put in a 4-bet. As it is, I don't know anything about him. I've got 7 hands on him and he hasn't played any of them, so for the time being at least, I've got to assume that he is relatively tight, even though it's a good spot to 3-bet light. 8-6 suited, I'll be playing this for min raise just because I'm getting an insanely good price in the pot, and when someone min raises the cutoff, they're probably not going to be the strongest player in the world. Flop I would have check called. I think a lot of people would see they have a pair and a flush draw and instantly check raise to try and get the stacks in, but the pure fact of the matter is that if I check raise and he's got a hand like ace king and we get it in, I'm not going to get it in ahead. If I check raise and he's got a hand like king jack, he's just going to fold, but then I'm ahead of king jack anyway, so it doesn't really make sense to I don't really achieve anything by check raising. So yeah, I think that this is a board where people would have check raised the 6-8, and I think that's pretty bad. Best players clearly to check call. I lead really big on the turn. I feel that if you check back an ace, he's not going to fold for whether I bet 50 cents or whether I bet 85 cents. If he's got a hand like pocket tens with a heart, he's just going to call as well, whatever size I bet. So it's a spot where I bet bigger than bet pretty big, because the hands that call a big bet, so you might as well get the most value you can. He makes a min raise, which is really weird, but I think he can definitely have a hand like pocket queens would make a lot of sense to check back the flop and then raise the turn. I wouldn't expect him to check back the flop with a flush draw, because any flush draw that he's got on the flop isn't going to have any showdown value, so it makes more sense for him to bet. So when he min raises the turn, he's either got a hand like ace queen that you check back the flop, or pocket queens, or queen 6, queen 4 maybe if he opens them from the small from the cutoff. But basically, I can either call here or re-raise, and I think the best play is to re-raise and hope that he's got a hand he wants to put more money in the pot with. Yeah, I could call and then plan to check raise blank river, but if he's bluffing on the turn, I don't expect him to keep on bluffing the river once I call. So I think the best play is just to put raising straight away and try to get money in the pot. He instantly folded to my free bet on the turn, which is pretty weird. I'm not sure. He was obviously bluffing, but it seems a really weird line to take when he's bluffing. Table 2, I open king jack off from middle position. I get called from the big blind, and then he check raises really small on this flop. Obviously king jack isn't a monster versus his value check raising range, because his check raising range is going to be a lot of hands like pocket 9s, pocket 4s, pocket jacks, ace jack, jack 9. You know, he's not. I don't see many players check raise a hand like jack 10 for value on this flop, because it puts yourself in a pretty sick spot. If you check raise jack 10 and get called, it's, you know, you don't really know where you are. If you check raise jack 10 and get re-raised, you're usually going to be behind, but I could be free. You know, if you check raise here and I re-raise, sometimes I'm going to have a hand like ace 7 of hearts, you know, with the overcard and the flush draw, and you're going to end up folding your jack 10, which means that you're folding the best hand. So put yourself in a pretty bad spot by check raising a hand like jack 10 or queen jack. So versus his value check raising range, I actually do quite badly, but when he check raises me to only $4, I actually don't expect him to have a big hand here very often at all, because of how drawy the flop is. If he's got a hand like pocket 9s, any heart, any queen, any 10, any 8, any king puts a potential straight on board, and any heart puts potential flush on board as well. I just feel that he'd be much more likely to make it like $5 or $5.50 with a set on this type of draw heavy board. So when he makes it this size, I expect him to have something pretty marginal, or perhaps a draw. So my plan was to call and then basically keep calling down if the board doesn't, if no draws get there. He bets like 1/3 pot on the turn, and I actually think now I think his most likely hand is something like queen 10 that check raised the flop with the open-ended straight draw, and now has picked up a pair and doesn't want to check fold, doesn't want to check call, so puts a little bet out there instead, just to, you know, like a blocking bet, so that it stops me from betting. You know, if he was to check and I bet, I'd obviously be betting like, you know, $7, $8. So when he puts this $3.50 out there, allows him to see a cheap river, you know, with what, you know, with a hand like queen 10. So I decided to call. I could have raised the turn to stack off, because obviously if he had a hand like queen 10, he's never going to fold it when I raise, because he's got a lot of equity. But the problem is I just do so badly if I run into a hand like, you know, if I run into a straight, or if I run into a you know, a hand like ace jack, I just do so badly when I get it in on the turn that being in position, you know, I just want to keep the pot small. He then goes ahead and bets like 1/3 pot on the river, and I think I'm getting value town quite a lot. Wouldn't expect him to bet, you know, queen 10 on the river. But for the price I'm getting, the fact the flush draw missed, the fact that he could just be a random fish who's just doing something retarded with Queen Jack, it means I have to call. And he ends up showing pocket eights, which kind of makes sense. You know, he check raised small on the flop to sort of find out where he's at. And then he picked up an open-ended straight draw on the turn, and he didn't want to check call because he doesn't have a great deal of equity. Doesn't want to check fold because, you know, he's ahead of my flush draws, he's ahead of my flop floats. So he goes ahead and puts that small blocking bet out to just to protect himself from putting a lot of money in the pot. I don't like his play because his check raise on the flop doesn't really fold out many better hands, and it doesn't really get called by many worse hands. It also makes the pot bigger out of position with a marginal hand, which isn't something that you want to do. You want to keep the pot small out. When you're out of position with a marginal hand, you want to keep the pot small, and the way you keep the pot small is not by check raising. I'm going to be opening King Jack suited on the button. I think midway through this video I change from opening to 4x in every position to opening to 3x in late position. And the reason I do that is because I found that people weren't actually flatting that much. Initially I thought that you know, NL25 players were going to be cold calling a ton with hands like, you know, ace-10 offsuit and then trying to hit the flop. But it seems that in rush poker at this stake, a lot of people are playing really fit or fold, and, you know, not cold calling much pre-flop, just either free betting or folding. So if they're free betting or folding, I want to make my raise sizes a bit smaller, since when I get free bet and have to fold, it costs me less money. Here I'll get two callers from the blinds. The flop comes at ace, king, queen. I think a lot of people at small stakes would just blindly c-bet this board because they were the pre-flop raiser and they feel that they have to c-bet. But I think it should, after what I explained earlier, it should be quite clear why this is a check back. You know, I don't really get a ton of value. Yeah, they sometimes call with like queen 10 or king 10, but combinatorically they just have so many more ace x hands. Also, if I'm ahead of them, then it's going to be because they've got a hand like 7-8 suited or pocket sixes, which have pretty much zero equity versus me anyway. So I just decide to check back and see a turn. If the turns are blank and I get led into, I can also call a lead quite easily with a pair and a gut shot. Now they check to me again. I'd expect, after the flop checks through and the free flush comes on the turn, I'd expect them to lead if they had an ace, purely because if they've got, say they've got ace 7 of diamonds, and I check back on the flop with a hand like pocket fives with the 5 of clubs, it's a disaster for them to let me check back the turn and see a free river when I've got, you know, 11 outs to a set or a flush. So it makes a lot more sense for them to lead the ace x hands. So when I get checked to a second time, I figure that I can actually value bet my king jack here. Also, much like I said, from their point of view, from my point of view, if they've got a hand like pocket sixes with a 6 of clubs that they're trying to check down, I shouldn't be letting them see a free river when they, you know, have a decent amount of equity. So I go ahead and bet. I think I think I'll get a bit of value. And the river comes offsuit 6, so there's no value for me of betting. If he's got an ace that he was playing passively, then he's not going to fold it. And if he's got a hand, you know, like pocket, you know, I don't know, pocket 7s with the 7 of clubs, then I'm ahead anyway, and so I can win. He ends up showing ace 3 offsuit, which is a really loose call pre-flop. Post-flop his play's fine. You know, there's no reason for him to lead the turn really, because he doesn't mind if a club river comes since he's got a club in his hand. So his post-flop his play's fine, but obviously pre-flop I think his play's pretty loose there. A little bit of dead time. Luckily there's not too much dead time because obviously I can just fold my hands, my small hands straight away. Table 2, undergun opens, I have ace queen. I think this is pretty standard call. I don't think there's any value really in free betting. We're quite deep and I'm out of position, and his range for open under gun is going to be quite tight. So if I free bet and get called, there's not going to be too many hands in his range that I'm dominating. I don't see him calling a free bet with like ace 10, because it looks really strong when I free bet out of position versus undergun opener and we're deep. This flop can go one of two ways. I can either check call or I can check raise. My plan was, if he bet like $1.50, I was just going to check call. But when he bets $1, when he bets like half pot, I feel that is pretty mandatory check raise for value. When he bets small like this, it's going to be with a lot of marginal hands that are just trying to get a little bit of thin value, as opposed to monsters, in my opinion. I feel that, although people shouldn't vary their bet sizing, I find a lot of people do. And so yeah, I feel that he's going to have a lot of marginal hands which can call a check raise, like king queen, queen jack. And the reason they can call is because I'm not really repping a ton. Like, I'm repping pocket fours and pocket twos and like pocket queens that didn't free bet. And if he's got a queen in his hand, there's only one combo of pocket queens left in the deck, so I'm not repping much when I check raise this board, which is obviously good when I've got ace queen. And now the turn comes to 2, I'm repping even less, because now there's only one combo. If he's got like king queen, there's one combo of pocket twos, one combo of pocket queens, 3 combos of pocket fours. It means I'm only repping like 5 combos of hands, which is really good from my perspective. So I take a really exploitive line and just bet small so that he keeps calling me down with, his queen jack and his king queen type hands. If he raises at any point, I'm just going to fold. I feel that he's going to think that I'm really polarised between sets and air, so it makes literally no sense for him to raise. It makes literally no sense for him to raise as a bluff, because if I'm bluffing myself, he can keep calling and take the pot away from me if I check the river. When the river's this jack, it's kind of lame, because obviously if he had queen jack, he's now beating me, so the only hand I can really get value from by betting is king queen. And there's still a possibility that he's going to show up with like kings or aces. So I decided to check, and if he bet really big, my plan was just going to be to check fold, because I wouldn't expect him to bet huge with like king queen. But if he bets small, I was probably going to look him up. He ends up betting like $5.50. I know what he's trying to do with this bet. He's trying to basically induce me to bluff check. He's basically betting this size so that he can induce me to like bluff raise, or so that he can get some really thin value. But I think that if he's going to make a small bet, he should make it a lot smaller than this. He should make it like $3. I think once you start betting like $5.50, there's not too much difference between betting this size and betting 8 or 9. So I feel that if he wants to do this small little bet, then he should bet really small, like $3. And if he wants to make a standard value bet, then he should just make it a lot bigger, like 8, 9, 10, something like that. When he bets this size, I mean, I'm getting such a good price to call, and the hands that beat me are quite limited. Plus the fact that I thought he would just bet bigger on the flop with his really big hands means that I think I can call here and show a profit. Just because he can be making this sort of bet with a hand like king queen, even though I don't think he should be making this bet with a hand like king queen. I think that he could be. Reason I don't think he should be making this bet with a hand like king queen is because I'm not going to be check raising the flop with like pocket eights and then betting the turn and then check calling the river. So if he's betting king queen on the river here, he's not really going to get any value, because I'm never going to be check calling a worse hand. So yeah, it wouldn't make much sense for him to bet king queen, so he should be only really betting like aces, kings, and then queen jack, and then boats. But I felt that I was getting a really good price. He can be doing something retarded, so I just go ahead and call. He ends up having pocket fours, and obviously I lose a medium sized pot. which isn't very good. Get led into with the ace queen on the queen 8-6 two-tone. I decide to raise because there is a ton of bads. There's a ton of bad turn cards, or there's a ton of turn cards that, you know, make him a flush or make him a straight, and because he's short stacked, it's going to be really hard to get away from the hand if I just call. So the only way I can really get him to make a mistake is by raising and hoping that he shoves over the top of it with like a straight draw or a flush draw. Open pocket twos on table 2. I'm going to be opening obviously a pair from any position at 6 max table. Here I would have called with pocket 9s if this guy had folded or flatted. When he 3-bets, I don't really think I can do anything with pocket 9s there. If I call, I'm going to be out of position. If I re-raise, I'm never going to be able to get it in good. So I think the best play is just to fold. Table 1 with the pocket 5s. If this guy had folded and the button had folded, then I would have let these pocket 5s go. Because I'm going to be out of position, it's going to be really hard to get stacks in the middle. Although we're deep stacked, I just don't see this player betting an overpair on the flop and then calling a check raise and then calling me down for free streets. So I'm not, I don't think I make a ton of money by flatting the 5s there. I don't think I make any money. I think it would have been minus EV call if this guy folded. But when it's a multi-way pot, obviously there's much more chance that if I flop a set, someone else can flop something. I'm also getting a better price with pot odds wise, so I don't need to win as much when I hit. Obviously I flop nothing after fold. I'm just going to play a couple more minutes and then I'm going to make this the end of part 1 and use the rest of the footage for part 2. I'm about 20 minutes through the footage now and there's 50 minutes total, so you just play out these few hands. Here the small blind opens into my big blind. I've got 6-7 offsuit, getting a good price. I've got position for the whole hand, pretty standard call. Flop comes 10-9-5, so I flop a gut shot with undercards. I mean, I could fold, but I think that'd be extremely tight just because this guy's going to be c-betting a lot of air on this board. He's just going to open and then find himself in a spot where he's got like ace queen and find that he has to c-bet because he doesn't want to check call, doesn't want to check fold. I could call, but the problem is that I can only really hit my gut shot to make me a good hand. If the turn is like a 6 and he bets again, I'm going to have to fold, right? So if I had a hand like king queen, where I've got 2 overcards and a gut shot, then I'd be much more inclined to call because on a turn card I can call. I can call again or I can flop a pair. I can turn a pair and call again, or I can miss the turn and I can call again just because I've still got a lot of equity in the pot. But here with 6-7, I don't think calling's very good because really, if I'm calling just to try and hit an 8, which is obviously 4 outs, and it's not really particularly likely that I'm going to turn it. So what I decided to do is go ahead and raise. Reason being that when I raise to 350, there's 250 in pot, so it doesn't need to work that often. Probably needs to work about 2/3 of the time. And combo wise, there's just so much of his range is going to have missed it. There's not very many monsters he can have on this board, right? He can have pocket 5s, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, 10-9, overpairs, and that's it in terms of monsters. Obviously he can have some stuff like queen jack with 2 overs and open and a straight draw, but if you look at his range as a whole, most of the time he's just going to have, ace 7 or king 8 suited or pocket 6s or something like that, which he's he's going to c-bet and then just fold to a raise. And the times that he does call, I've got 4 outs to make the best hand anyways, so I've still got a little bit of equity when called. I'll just play out this pocket 4s hand. I don't think anything exciting happens. I think this guy just makes a continuation bet and I fold. So I'm going to stop the video there, and I'm going to make the rest of the video into part 2, because I don't want to make the video too long. You know, I don't want you to get bored watching it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed part 1. If you've never seen Rush played before, then obviously now you've seen how it works. It's a pretty fun game. It definitely allows you to get a lot of hands in per hour. I mean, if you're 4 tabling 6 max Rush, you're going to be playing like 800 hands an hour, which obviously it's going to allow you to make a lot more money. It's going to allow you to put in more volume and therefore get more experience. So I definitely recommend trying Rush out. It's definitely worth trying, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, this has been Jack Wilcox making a video for thepokerbank.com.